Hello, my friends, and welcome back to yet another episode of Watching the Watchers Live. My name is Robert Govea. I am a criminal defense attorney at the R&R Law Group located in the always beautiful and sunny Scottsdale, Arizona. And today, my friends, we are talking about scrutiny. That is the word of the day. We've got a lot of business to attend to. We've got some activity in the Supreme Court of the United States. Donald Trump is fighting to protect his taxes from being disclosed over to the House Ways and Means Committee. And so we're going to start there. We've got two different documents to attend to on this issue. This is landing in front of the Supreme Court, and we've been holding off on this until we get all of the filings completed. All of the filings are there now. So we are essentially going to be turning this over to the Supreme Court soon enough. So we're going to talk about what the House Ways and Means Committee said. Trump said, I don't want you to get my taxes. They said, we deserve your taxes. And Trump issued a reply as to why they should not get his taxes. And so we've got some, constitutional issues to talk about, like separation of powers and things like that, before we check in with one of Trump's lawyers, of course, Alina. She's telling us the Trump defense team's pretty happy about a lot that's going on here. They're winning. They've got, Rudy Giuliani's been successful. Other lawsuits against Donald Trump have been resolved. So we'll see what she has to say. We'll also check in with Mitch McConnell. Of course, big announcement yesterday. Donald Trump made a big announcement that he's running for president again. And we've been covering that here. We've been sort of following along here. We made a video on this channel describing sort of my thoughts, reactions on that. So if you missed that, that came out earlier this morning in walk and talk version. But we have McConnell, who we heard from today. He says, I've got no dog in the fight. It's going to be a brutal battle, and he's just staying mum about it. So we'll check in with Mitch McConnell. Then we're going to jump over to this FTX saga, because there is just an absolute ton of stuff going on here. This guy, you probably know him as SBF, or Sam Bankman-Fried, an individual who used to run a very, very allegedly reputable organization called FTX. And we're learning that as this crypto company comes crashing down, there's some pretty nefarious business going on behind the scenes. Some people calling it a Democratic slush fund. And there's this gentleman that I want to share with you. We've talked a lot about him here, whether you know him by name or not, right? Balaji Srinivasin. Brilliant dude, somebody I trust and I think has, a real good bearing on the crypto space. He put together an amazing thread on this. He said, the net result of FTX is that billions of dollars were stolen from crypto investors, okay, everyday people like you and me, and given to Democratic politicians, nonprofits, and journalists. That's why there's going to be no prosecution. So an amazing thread he put together. We're going to learn more about all of that. How did literally hundreds of millions of dollars get funneled through FTX back over to the Democrats? It's pretty shocking. We're going to learn about who this guy is and why he didn't want to report any of those donations. We're going to learn more about him and his, lover or CEO or something, this gal right here. There might be a tape of them or something. Sister, somebody's saying, I don't know what's going on. We gotta learn more about what's going on here. But he was a major donor. You can see he was the second largest Democratic donor after George Soros. And we'll talk a lot about that whole saga, including what some people are saying is a very interesting, convenient little circle you see here between FTX, the Democratic Party, Joe Biden, and Ukraine, very surprisingly. So we'll talk a lot about that. Now, simultaneously, okay, as FTX is sort of coming crashing down, the DOJ is starting some investigations. We've got the SEC and others are sort of, should we go investigate him? I mean, he gave a lot of money to the Democrats. And so we'll see, right, if anything ultimately comes of this. But it's a big deal. Now, simultaneously, there is a class action lawsuit that was filed against basically everybody out there. Tom Brady, Kevin O'Leary, we've got a bunch of NBA players all listed as defendants in this major class action lawsuit, including the lawsuit against SBF. And it's because they were promoting FTX. You've got, Tom Brady, who's out there. So I love trading with crypto and I do this, that, and the other. And you can trust me. And of course, Kevin O'Leary, we love him from Shark Tank, And they're all now defendants in a pretty big class action. And they actually clipped from SBF's Twitter thread in the lawsuit, in the class action lawsuit. The first tweet that they reference, you see right here, is where he says, I effed up pretty big time. So it's just, there's a lot of, it's a big mess going on out there. And honestly, people are concerned that this is going to have contagion. Other crypto companies are sort of, there's a domino effect that's happening, and people are saying this might spread into, traditional finance and the traditional sector. So we're keeping our eye on all of that. But as you can see, there is just an absolute ton to get to. And if you want to be a part of the show, my friends, the best place to do that is over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. They're chatting away. We're trying to decide the relationship between SBF's girlfriend or sister or whatever that is. But shout outs to C. Reed, Savdi, JC the Music Man, John McGarvey's in the house, Ken Innit, ZW Troll, many others, including the lurkers. Dana 36G is not a lurker, but Albion Thailand is certainly. We have got Cy Smith. We have Lone Eagle, very appropriate lurker name, over on Locals. And that's a great place to connect with our community, get stories throughout the day, get the walk and talks, and all sorts of fun stuff. And I appreciate your support, helping our community grow so that we can connect and stay connected no matter what happens out there, because we're talking about some prickly issues. And hey, by the way, I almost forgot to mention our dear friend Joe Neerman. Before we jump into the meat and potatoes on the program today, he is serving a strike on YouTube. And you, of course, know him as Good Logic on YouTube. He's right next door on YouTube. He's right next door on Locals. He's right next door on Rumble as well. And he got served with a strike. And here's what happened. Oh, the strike was lifted. This is tremendous news. Here's what he says. The strike was lifted. Video is still banned at 5:30. I will be live streaming to Locals and providing my thoughts. Awesome. All right, so Joe's back in business. But look at this. He received a strike for airing the Dave Chappelle skit on his show. And he was commenting on this as whether or not it was anti-Semitic. And of course, as we know, Good Logic might know something about this, given his religious disposition. And so he's having a conversation about something that's perfectly, I think, appropriate to have a conversation about. He got a strike. Strike was lifted. Great news. And so go over to Good Logic. He's on Locals. Make sure he's going to be live streaming tonight at 5:30. So you're not going to want to miss that. In fact, maybe we should just shut the show down right now and just go over there. I'm not sure about. Okay, we'll keep going on the show, but go check him out. Goodlogic.locals.com. Shout out to our friend Joe over there. We're glad you are back, our friend. All right. And so now, my friends, let's cue this up because we've got some heavy lifting to get to today. The battle for Trump's taxes continue, now sitting in front of the Supreme Court. We've got several different briefs that we're going to go through today. Remember, this is about Trump wanting to stop the government from getting his taxes. They've wanted his taxes for a long time. They filed all sorts of different suits all over the place in different parts of the country. But now that Donald Trump is no longer the president, the House Ways and Means Committee is saying, oh, perfect. Now it's time to get our grubby little fingers on Trump's taxes. And now that Donald Trump has even announced he's running for president, boy, oh boy, you can imagine they really want this stuff and they want it bad, baby. So we have to get an update. Now, remember that this is in front of the Supreme Court. And so this is kind of the final stop here for this litigation. And this is a new situation because Donald Trump is no longer in office. And he filed an application for a stay submitted to the Chief Justice back on October 31st. And we covered that, right? We read through the whole thing and they said, Supreme Court here, we've got a separation of powers problem here. We've got an executive privilege problem here. We've got all sorts of issues with the legislative branch being able to come in, which is a co-equal branch of government, by the way, and just sort of running roughshod over the executive branch. Right? We don't want the president to run roughshod over Congress, just like we don't want Congress to run roughshod over the executive branch. And so it's this little problem. And so we are now, the way this worked, Trump won a prohibition on the documents being transferred from the IRS over to the House Ways and Means Committee. Trump won at the lowest level court. They took that up on appeal, and the DC Circuit Court of Appeals said, oh, Trump, sorry, you're a loser. You lose now. And so they said to the IRS, go ahead and start packing up all the paperwork, get that over to Trump, or get that over to the House Ways and Means Committee as soon as you can. Trump, that same basically day, they filed an application for a stay. They said, Judge, hold on a minute. Stop that Court of Appeals from sending those documents back over to the IRS or the IRS sending the documents over to the House Ways and Means Committee. And on November 1st, the Supreme Court came out and they said, okay, well, we heard you, Trump. They said, all right, it is now ordered that the United States District Court of Appeals for DC, it's ordered stayed. pending further development from the Supreme Court. And then we got the response. So these are the items that we're going to go through today. A response filed by the United States and a response filed by the House Ways and Means Committee, right? Congress is actually, they have got their own lawyers that they're drafting responses, for this case. And so we're not going to look at the United States filing. We're going to look at the Ways and Means Committee's filing. They're saying, hey, judges at the Supreme Court, we're entitled to Trump's taxes. I mean, we should get these things. And then we're going to look at Trump's actual reply. And this is where, Trump is saying there's absolutely no reason why they should have my taxes. And the way this works, again, there's an original filing, which is Trump. Trump submitted the original document to the Supreme Court. Government responds, and then Trump gets the final word. So we're going to go through all of that. We've got 2 documents here that are going to detail everything for us. But before we jump right into the actual filing, I have to tell you about our friends over at 4 Patriots Survival Food. As you know, there could be a food shortage coming. Experts are saying this might happen as recently as July. There's drought, there's inflation, there's new policies. Food supply is really near a breaking point. That's why survival food is more important now than ever. Create your own stockpile of the best-selling 4 Patriots survival food kits. This is not ordinary survival food. This is good for 25 years super survival food, hand-packed by family-owned businesses right here in the United States, giving jobs to over 300 Americans. These kits are sturdy, they're water-resistant, they stack very easily. There's different delicious meals, breakfast, lunches, and dinners. You can make them in less than 20 minutes. All you've got to do is add boiling water, simmer, and serve. And now you can get this amazing 3-month food survival kit. You get a freshness guarantee for the entire year after you submit an order. You can go to 4patriots.com, use promo code Robert to get 10% off. You get free shipping on any orders over $97. This company is called 4 Patriots because a portion of every sale goes to charities that support our veterans and their families. And so please, my friends, go to 4patriots.com, use code Robert, and get your stockpile today. All right, so let's get into the actual filings that are hitting at the Supreme Court. Filed by the government, the House of Representatives, the Committee on Ways and Means, they are opposing Donald Trump's emergency application to stop the government from giving their committee Trump's taxes. The government says, we want these taxes. Trump tried to stop us from getting them. They're telling the Supreme Court we're opposing Trump's actions. You can see a bunch of lawyers signed off on this from various locations, all coming out of the United States House of Representatives. We've got a big table of authority, and this document is 52 pages. So we're just going to hit some of the introductory language, and then we'll jump into some of the responses. But we've got our table of authorities, the Ways and Means Committee. They're going to tell us we've got authority to do all of this stuff. They give us the IRS procedures. They talk about 2019, 2021 requests and all of those different things. But once we get to the actual introduction, we see this is why the government thinks that they are entitled to the records. They write, for more than 3 years, very irritated they are, the House of Representatives has been considering legislative proposals and conducting oversight related to whether the IRS can take the tax records of former presidents. Concerns about the IRS's ability to do this, they're not entirely new. They say in the early 1970s, a congressional investigation revealed that the IRS had kind of screwed up with Richard Nixon's taxes, and they prompted the IRS to adopt a policy that says that the president's and vice president's annual tax returns will be subject to mandatory audit. Okay, the IRS said, this is our policy now. We're just going to go in and investigate presidents if we want to. They write, former President Donald Trump's term in office raised similar concerns, and in fact, it amplified them. Unlike his predecessors, Mr. Trump owned a complex web of businesses, engaged in business activities internationally, had a history, as they say, of aggressive tax avoidance, as he even boasted, right? I don't pay taxes, he said. Claimed to be under continuous audit and has denounced the IRS as being unfair. And we love the IRS. We pay all our taxes here, all right? Just leave us alone. These substantial concerns prompted the chairman of the House Committee on Ways and Means, Richard Neal, to begin an investigation of the IRS's mandatory presidential audit with respect to Trump's returns, which I'm sure was totally nonpartisan and apolitical, and not even any bias or animus towards Trump at all. And so in furtherance of that investigation, Chairman Neal exercised his authority under the law to request from the IRS the income tax returns of Mr. Trump, all the way back to 2015 to 2020, along with related returns from the IRS files. Guided by this court's precedent, including Trump versus Mazars, which was in 2020, the chairman request robustly articulated and documented the legislative need for the request. Now, this is an important phrase, right? A legislative purpose. Congress needs to do something legislatively, right, in order to have jurisdiction over these issues. Congress can't act like a grand jury. They can't act like a partisan political hack body like they have been acting like for the last 2 years and just go and decide, well, we're just going to go, well, we think we need Trump's tax records. Why? Because we can get them. No, not because you're curious and you want to leak them to the New York Times. You have to understand that there's a basis for them that's going to serve a legislative purpose. Like you're going to pass some law, you're going to do something that doesn't specifically single out Trump, because that would be a problematic law, right? It would be neutrally applied, facially neutral, and applied to the whole country. So they would be researching this, right? They're a big committee and well, why don't you come in here and all they do in Congress mostly is they just send letters and they just call people in to sit in front of them and lie to their faces. And so, they are saying that in order to do that, you got to have a legislative purpose. You just can't do it because you're bored and you hate Trump. So they said, well, guess what? We have done that here. Yes, in 2020, in Trump versus Mazars, you said we can't just be partisan hack Supreme Court. We have to have a legislative purpose. And so we've done that. We have actually said now that there is a legislative purpose. The request explained that the committee is examining the need for legislation on equitable tax administration, including on the president, and that we cannot properly evaluate the effectiveness of this program without access to Trump's returns. So they say, oh, well, we're just trying to regulate presidents in the future. He happens to be the most recent president, so we better start with him. What do you think? Treasury subsequently determined, they said that they were obligated to give the information over because the Office of Legal Counsel, which is now, under Joe Biden, had said, yeah, no, give them the records. Perfect. Mr. Trump and his businesses, and those returns were requested. They turned around and they sought to stop the Treasury from complying with the request. They said, hold on a minute. We've got statutory protections. We've got constitutional claims here that say that you can't get those documents. The district court rejected those claims across the board, dismissed a complaint. A panel of D.C. Circuit then affirmed. And then the Trump party's petitioned for a rehearing, and no judges recorded a dissent. Now, further review from the court is unwarranted, they're saying. So they're saying that Trump just took this all the way up to the Supreme Court. I might have gotten that procedural history wrong. I think we'll see. We'll see what Trump says. Further review from this court is unwarranted. So there's no net. So I guess let me clarify that. Procedural history is, I don't know exactly how it landed. I can't remember exactly how it landed in front of the Supreme Court. Whether he won at the lower level district court or whether he lost at the lower level district court, as they are to argue here. It's sort of inconsequential either way. They're at the Supreme Court. Further review from this court is unwarranted, writes the government, so there necessarily is no basis to issue the relief. The committee's request plainly serves a valid purpose. We said we're going to regulate the president. And Congress's power to obtain information is broad and indispensable. Longstanding precedent makes clear that we get access to these records. Now they say the Trump party, so the Trump's team, says that this is unsettled and that the president's personal information here is just unavailable if it is a pretextual request. And so the criminal law analogy that we use all the time, right, is sometimes police will hang outside of like a marijuana dispensary and they'll, pull somebody over and they'll say, do you know why I stopped you? And you'll say, no, I don't know why. And they'll say, well, you made a wide right turn or you have a tail light out or something, right? The cops don't really care about a tail light or a wide right turn unless it's 2 a.m. Then they go, perfect. That's a great reason to stop you so they can get you for a DUI. Same thing here, right? They're not actually interested in legislating presidents. They're interested in getting Trump's tax records. But they say, but we have communicated a valid legislative purpose. We have communicated a license plate light. We've communicated a wide right turn. Therefore, it doesn't matter what you say. They say As the Court of Appeals determined, the chairman's request from the House committee comports with constitutional principles of separation of powers under any proposed test, including the one that you announced, Supreme Court, previously. The Trump's parties, they say the lower court misapplied the decision in Mazars, and this was a rare error. But they're challenging the validity of the request. They say that none of that should be allowed. Therefore, they say the application should be denied, right? So in other words, Trump's request to stop the government from transferring the actual physical tax records from the IRS, Department of Treasury, over to the House, it's currently on hold. The government says lift the hold so that it can go back and continue forward. Now, the rest of this, right, it's a big filing, and if you want to go check it out, of course, you can go to the Supreme Court docket. All of this is publicly available. But let's go to the reply from Trump and his team, which is a little bit more interesting. And it's not quite as long. It is 16 pages. So I think we can get through the whole thing. In the Supreme Court of the United States, Donald Trump issues a reply in support of his original application to stop or to stay the transfer of documents from the IRS over to the House Ways and Means Committee, over to the Democrats. He's saying, Supreme Court, please stop this from happening. This is on application from the U.S. Court of Appeals in the D.C. Circuit. You see Trump's lawyers are Thomas McCarthy and others. We've got a short filing here, only about 12, 16 pages in total. Table of authorities, and they're replying to the government's response. The government is opposing demands the lift of the stay. Trump wants the stay to remain. Trump's lawyers write, constitutionally, Your Honors, the stakes could not be greater. No prior Congress has used its legislative power to obtain and expose the private financial information of a president. The last time Congress tried, this court entered a stay, granted review, and rejected Congress's assertion of authority 9-0, citing the case Trump versus Mazars. This court's intervention helped preserve the balance of power, forcing Congress to narrow its demands and jumpstarting the accommodation process. Among the unprecedented demands for Trump's taxes, however, this demand was always the worst, they write. No records have more, quote, intense political interest than Trump's tax returns. And no request was supported by more objective evidence of improper purpose, right? Not legislative purpose, political partisan hackery purpose. The evidence is so blatant that even before Mazars raised the legal standard, saying that you've got to have a legislative purpose to get this stuff, the executive branch rejected the committee's request for lacking a legitimate legislative purpose. That came from Senator Grassley, another letter. The committee was concluding the same. Yet the D.C. Circuit dismissed all that evidence as improper and a hunt for congressional motive, even under the now heightened standard. Because that test also governs sitting presidents, and because disputes usually arise in D.C., the decision below from the lower level court to force the records to go from the government to the House committee will force all presidents to fight abusive congressional demands for their personal information with two hands tied behind their back. If we just have to sit there as a president in the executive branch and just get these requests from some stupid committee member named Neil, he's just like, well, we just want your records, I guess. And what do you need them for? Oh, we're going to come up with legislation. Yeah, right. Nobody believes it. And the president is just going to sit there with his hands tied. I mean, Democrats out there, would you like this flipped around the other direction? You have Jim Jordan just sending letters to Joe Biden. Give me your taxes. Give me this. Give me that. Give me whatever you want. No, of course not. Meanwhile, Trump's team says the equities could not be more lopsided. Respondents don't disagree that absent a stay, President Trump will immediately and irretrievably lose his rights as a taxpayer to his privacy and judicial review. The government also doesn't identify any remotely comparable harm on their side. Okay, what happens if you don't get the tax records? If you do get them and you expose them all over the place, Trump has some harm, right? He actually has some privacy right violations. But if you don't get them, what is the harm to your legislative investigation, whatever it is you're doing? The executive, they say, has no legitimate interest in rapidly exposing the private finances of its former boss, and Congress has no pressing interest in studying how the IRS audits presidents. Even like, do we have a big problem? Is this a huge problem in Congress right now? presidents aren't paying their taxes or something like that. The House Ways and Means Committee needs to really drop everything and investigate this. Even though the committee has access to reams of information about presidential audits now, including an eager IRS, it hasn't begun any serious legislative study. It remains singularly focused on getting the information of one particular president named Trump, whose audits aren't even finished yet. And all agree that should this court grant a stay and later deny cert or affirm, the committee is free to continue its investigation in the next Congress. However, the next Congress is not going to be Democratic anymore, and so this is going to have to be decided really quickly. And if it's decided before the balance of power changes, maybe the IRS and the Department of Treasury, they start wrapping up Trump's stuff. They start, go get the binders. All right, go get them. Packing them all up, which is why this is accelerating. In fact, the legislative calendar weighs in favor of more deliberation, not less. Just last week, Americans voted to elect a new House and Senate. That new Congress is going to convene on January 3rd. Meanwhile, the old Congress only has a few days left on its legislative calendar. Though a few days is enough time to improperly expose these most sensitive documents of its chief political rival, it's not enough time to properly study, draft, debate, or even pass legislation. As the D.C. Circuit Court once held in similar circumstances, granting a stay would have the benefit, meaning stopping the government from transferring the taxes, would have the benefit of permitting the new House, the Republican House, an opportunity to express their views on the merits of the lawsuit. And guess what? Their opinion's going to be on this. Probably not all that interested. Only that result reflects, quote, the special solitude that this court gives certiorari petitions from former presidents. And only that result honors every branch's duty to avoid these kinds of constitutional classes whenever possible. We're not supposed to be partisan political hacks in our roles as official government people. You're supposed to do your job as a congressperson, but now it's sort of become part of your job is to protect democracy. And because very conveniently that includes eviscerating your political enemies, you now get the benefit of both things smashed into one. Trump's team says this court should enter a stay. They have some argument. They say this court should stay the lower court's mandate of transferring the records. And then it should set a schedule for further briefing. Right? So we're not even talking about the full issue yet. We're just talking about the stay. Whether the DC Circuit Court, whether the stay should stay in place while this continues on. This court took the same course in a different case under indistinguishable circumstances. Because think about it the other way, right? The judge could say, well, and I guess you can start the transfer process and you can brief me while it's all ongoing. But of course, then it might become moot. And so they're arguing that this isn't even the full brief yet. The equities are lopsided in favor of a stay, and the stay is the only way to preserve this court's ability to review the important questions. Because if there isn't a stay, if this court lifts the stay, the records are going to go out to the committee, and then this whole thing's going to be moot. This court granted a stay in another case, they argue. To resist a stay pending certiorari, the House pressed the same arguments in a prior case that they pressed here. Yet in the Mazars case, the court granted a stay. It should do it here too. Though Mazars was decided before Donald Trump left office, the committee's demand for his tax information was issued while he was in office. And it was continuously pursued. It was evaluated under the Mazars test because it does implicate separation of powers. So they're arguing just because Trump left doesn't mean that you should change. Don't change anything. Use the same test and apply it and dump this case just like you did the last one. How the D.C. Circuit decided this case thus has sweeping implications for both former presidents and sitting presidents. There's no change. This case presents no issues less weighty than the other cases. This concerns congressional demand for Trump's personal information, and it implicates separation of powers. All parties agree the committee's request implicates separation of powers because there is an interbranch conflict. Just as in prior cases that we had issues with Trump's private papers, this is now bringing the president's papers and the judiciary, quote, into uncharted territory, asking the court to really step in here and settle this. Whether and how the considerations apply here is a question of first impression, and it's very foundational to our entire constitutional structure. The government ignores that the executive branch previously found the same request unconstitutional, right? Trump's people, when they were sort of dealing with these requests, they said, oh no, it's unconstitutional. But as soon as Biden took over, his attorney decided it was perfectly reasonable to do this. Trump's team says the equities, sort of what's fair, it balances a stay, meaning the document should not be transferred. President Trump faces the same form of irreparable harm. The mooting of the case. If the documents are public, there's nothing else to talk about. The government even acknowledges that. The arguments they make were all raised, all rejected in the prior case. Instead of crediting these concerns, the court granted our stay and reversed 9-0. So the court should do the same here. Careful deliberation, not haste, is the watchword that we think is appropriate. And therefore, grant the stay so that we can have a full briefing and full deliberation when you grant certiorari. The equities overwhelmingly favor a stay, they can continue. The government acknowledges that Trump will have irreparable harm. They're correct. Without a stay, his legal claims become moot, and all of the confidential information in the taxes will be disclosed. Nor does the committee contest that the equities strongly favor intervention. In just over a single page at the back of its brief, the committee suggests granting the application would, quote, seriously harm Congress. It claims that the committee would have little or no time to complete their work during this Congress. They're saying, we are running out of time. We got to get this thing done. We're going to be out of power soon. It's quickly approaching. But Trump's people respond. They say, look, okay, this Congress already lacks enough time to start the supposed legislative work, right? They're not going to get it done before they're out there. They've got 17 days left in their final session, and then it's over. It's inconceivable that Congress is going to suddenly wake up and adequately analyze the voluminous sets of documents that are Trump's taxes, that they're going to, hold hearings, propose new legislation, and then vote on it in 17 days. You kidding me? In its lone paragraph suggesting harm to the Congress, the committee has nothing to say about this. And secondly, the equities favor a brief delay so that the new Congress can actually consider the matter. We don't want these old Congress people who aren't even going to be in charge anymore to continue on with this. Let's let the new people who just got elected in. All agree that no amount of delay would moot this and that it could carry over to the next Congress. The balance is changing soon. And third, any urgency of the government that they're alleging, they created it themselves. We've told you that this case has already been stayed for over 1,100 days across 2 Congresses, and that any prejudice that the committee suffers, Congress has been waiting for years for this. And so anything that they have suffered is their own self-inflicted harm. Instead, the supposed harms that Congress is facing from delay, they're not irreparable at all. Right? If they really want to pass legislation, well, they can investigate this whenever they want. They don't need to do it right now in this Congress immediately. And so therefore, that's not a good enough reason to deny the stay and allow the documents to be exposed, mooting the entire case. If anything, they are reasons to simply treat this application as a certiorari petition and set an expedited schedule for briefing on the merits. That course would allow for the efficient resolution of this case, allow the new Congress to weigh in without giving short shrift to these serious legal issues. Now, there's a footnote here. We see a little asterisk, which is curious. And they have that noted here for us here. They say, strangely, the committee suggests that this court should treat the stay application as a certiorari and then deny it. But while quickly granting certiorari, okay, so that's some technical stuff. We'll skip over that. Now, the argument from Trump's team says, also, court, by the way, you should grant the stay because we're probably going to win on in the end anyways. The government downplays the importance of this case. The committee cast this dispute as a mere misapplication of the law. But even if that was right, some misapplications of the law do warrant the Supreme Court's review. The government says the D.C. Circuit Court applied the Mazars test, the same one that would govern a sitting president, but this introduces new problems. They say this conclusion is not worthy of consideration. They say the committee misunderstands the Mazars case and that the dispute implicates more than what was implicated in Mazars. It concerns what the court can look at and the differential levels of review. Now, when addressing the different considerations in Mazars, they go through sort of the different elements. They say the government cannot hide behind the generic principle that Congress is allowed to go up some blind alleys into non-productive enterprises. They can't go on fishing expeditions. They can't make up a reason to pull you over. Your license plate lights out. You made a wide right turn. You stopped in the crosswalk. And then charge you with, serious drug crimes and investigate you with a full body cavity search, right? It's not what they're allowed to do, because it becomes partisan and because it becomes exploitable. When it comes to President, Trump's lawyers say congressional demands must be no broader than reasonably necessary to support Congress's legislative objectives. And the United States, at one point, even agreed with that. Evidence must include whether they were properly searching for evidence or whether they were just going after purely private citizens. The prior test wanted to heighten the test, saying that the government can only act when they've got legitimate legislative purpose. They can't drop below that standard. And so Trump's lawyers write in conclusion, they say, this court should order that the mandate of the D.C. Circuit, which is now stayed pending further order of this court, is further stayed pending the filing and the disposition of this case. Right. So it's very preliminary here. They want, and actually, this gives Trump and his team more time, right? Consider this a stay and then set a whole nother deadline and allow us to file our petition for a writ of certiorari, 2 weeks from now. And guess what? That eats into those 17 days. This court could also construe this application as a petition for certiorari and grant review. And that would sort of accelerate things, right? So they would sort of prefer the first option to the second option, but signed off on by Thomas McCarthy, Patrick Strawbridge, both representing Donald Trump to the United States Supreme Court. And that wraps up the filing. So you can see we have Trump's original application, which was filed back in October. Then we've got the government's response from the United States. We've got the committee from the Ways and Means. And then we have Trump's reply. And we'll start to see more from the United States Supreme Court. They will give us some deadlines and we'll learn more from them. But we've also got some updates on some other lawsuits that Trump is involved in because, of course, there are a lot of them. Trump lawyer Alina gives us an update on other litigation that Trump is facing around the country. And she says that they are winning.
Against the president's former personal attorney and the former mayor of New York. That was a really big deal. What was your take on that?
That was such a big deal. Oh, that was a big deal. And, we've spoken about this. It just tells you how, they went in, they seized. Does it sound like something we know? Yeah. They go into his house, they take things, and they traumatize this person. They try and ruin his career. They're not doing it. And he's resilient as well. And you know what? It was all for nothing. They are really just constantly eating their words. And their behavior is being noticed. And I'm really glad that there are judges that are noticing it and that are saying we're not going to allow this anymore. I mean, between Michael Cohen, the Trump family won against Mary Trump last night, and now Rudy's win, I think it's a great sign for things to come. And I think it's a great night to do this, for many reasons.
Alina, Trump's lawyer, who is communicating that they are winning big time. They are having a tremendous series of victories. And she went through the litany. Michael Cohen's having a tough time. Alex Vindman's having a tough time. Rudy Giuliani was exonerated. No criminal charges for him. And they're doing pretty good. In fact, so good that they're going out and announcing Trump's running for president again, whether you like it or not, America. It's coming, and it's coming hard. And Alina is there celebrating the victories. All right, so we've got some more to get to. And of course, we have to check in with the turtle, Mitch, because he's got some reaction for us. After Donald Trump made his announcement, he's running for president again. A lot of people want to know what the Republican GOP leaders have to say about it. We don't hear too much from Mitch McConnell, but here's his reaction to the announcement.
Mr. Leader, can you respond to former President Trump announcing that he plans to run for re-election? And do you believe that will help or hinder your chances in the Georgia runoff?
The way I'm going to go into this presidential primary season is to stay out of it. I don't have a dog in that fight. I think it's going to be a highly contested nomination fight with other candidates entering, and it's all going to be quite good for you all to cover.
How do you think it will impact your runoff in Georgia? Do you want former President Trump to come to Georgia?
We're going to do everything we can to get Herschel Walker elected. We can't pretty well determine who's going to come in. We'll see how that develops.
So he's being pretty neutral here. Doesn't have a dog in the fight, not one way or the other. Is just kind of okay letting it unfold. And I really actually think that's the right answer. You know, a lot of politicians are going to be encouraged to pick sides and sort of incentivize making a hard decision. And that is probably going to lead to more division. And so he's going to play mum, you know, for the foreseeable future, as we would expect from the turtle. But all right, so that's Cocaine Mitch, who's out there, who's, you know, sometimes he doesn't seem like he's on that much cocaine if we take a look at it. But that is the update on the Donald Trump taxes. Of course, the House Ways and Means Committee really, really wants them. And we'll see more updates from the U.S. Supreme Court. And when those documents hit the docket, we will cover them here. Thank you for joining us wherever you are watching this. Thank you for liking this video. We'll see you on the next one. All right. And so we've got a whole big meatball to really dive into here. There is just a lot here. Yes, yeah. And so FTX now. A Democratic slush fund revealed. A lot of people are asking questions about this individual here, SBF, Sam Bankman-Fried, the individual who just lost something like $16 billion in personal net worth overnight, something like $30 billion may have evaporated. Millions of consumers have been screwed out of their money. And people are putting two and two together, and they're asking whether or not this is all going to the Democrats. This individual here the name is Balaji Srinivasin. We've talked about him here on this channel before. Brilliant individual. He's the author of a book called The Network State. He was big into Bitcoin very early on. He was the chief technical officer at Coinbase for a long period of time, helped launch that company. Somebody I think is extremely, extremely credible. And this is what he posted on Twitter. Balaji said, "The net result of FTX is that billions of dollars was stolen from crypto investors, people like you and me, to give to Democrat-aligned politicians, nonprofits, and journalists." Journalists too, which is why a lot of this stuff is being buried. All of them circling up and protecting SBF. Now, this is why he says there may be no prosecution. So he put together a pretty amazing Twitter thread on this, and we're going to get into that in a minute. But there's a lot more background that we need to check on this first, because you can see there's just a lot of material here that are going to allow us to add some meat around the bone. So who is this guy, SBF? There's this video. You may have seen this. I'm not going to play the full thing because it's so cringeworthy. But SBF was promoted as somebody who gave a lot of money for a bunch of resources. And take a look at these causes that SBF was thrilled about.
Last year, this 29-year-old guy donated $50 million. Next year, he's planning to donate $500 million a year. Wow. And next decade, he will probably give away more than $10 billion. And he is funding everything you can think of. Global warming.
Oh,
it's one of the biggest problems that we have to tackle together as a world.
COVID-19 preparedness.
We have to be ready for the next pandemic.
Neglected tropical diseases.
More than 1 billion people suffer from them. We have to eliminate these diseases.
And of course, animal welfare.
Animals deserve to live just like we do. It's also why I'm vegan.
And they're delicious. That's why we eat them. So he is a very interesting character, as you can see, this little personality thing he's got going on. Extremely young, had evidently made billions of dollars kind of overnight. And all of that was to be given back to democratic causes like global warming, COVID, animal rights, and strange new diseases that probably require 35 new vaccinations in order to survive them. So very interesting questions about this guy. And he just kind of popped up out of nowhere. And I've used FTX. I was a customer. I've used FTX. And it is pretty amazing that all of this has come crashing down. Listen to this guy when he is explaining to Bloomberg, right, during one of these big events, SBF communicating to other finance connoisseurs that he's very responsible and he doesn't do things, like dip into consumer funds and use them for his own purposes.
That's the place where it's sort of like most obvious that we should act, because if we don't, they might be slightly underwater, and there are serious questions about, like, do they have to take drastic corporate action? But for like a relatively small, sort of like potential incineration of money, we can like resolve that problem and make them able to like continue operating and like carry on and not like cause contagion or customers losing assets or anything like that.
What?
So that sort of like is the best case. Well, okay, the best case is that I have tons of extra capital, but then why are they calling us? So okay, of the calls we might get, the best case is when they have about zero left, right? And they're like, look, we need a buffer here so that we can like definitely pay salaries without dipping into customer funds, like, and we're like, that makes sense, right? And in those cases, like what we would tend to do is like, okay,
because otherwise they would.
Well, depending on the company, right?
Right.
Otherwise they
Depending on the
maybe
company.
they would declare bankruptcy, or maybe they would dip into customer, whatever.
Maybe they would dip into other people's funds. Depends on the company. The reputable companies would never do something like that. But those shady companies, they might dip into customer funds, which is why they've got to call FTX and we'll help bail them out. Little did we all know that they were dipping into their own customer funds and they weren't keeping good track or any liquidity of any of the money that was supposedly supposed to be there for their consumers. This is SBF's girlfriend or something. Very interesting situation happening there out of the Bahamas. The CEO of Alameda is explaining risk to two young gentlemen, and she doesn't even really need math to make all of this stuff work. It's just magic.
Yeah, absolutely could pull it off without my math degree. Use very little math. Use a lot of like elementary school math. Being comfortable with risk is very important. We tend not to have things like stop losses. I think those aren't necessarily a great risk management tool. Trying to think of a good example of a trade where I've lost a ton of money.
We can think of a
well,
couple.
I don't know. I probably don't want to go into specifics too much.
Yeah, good call on that one. Yeah, good call. Yeah, you don't want to go into any specifics on the risk situation that you're involved in because you lost a dozen billion dollars like that. Shocking. Now, okay, so who is this person? Now, you can see this clip here of Sam Bankman-Fried, and there's a pretty interesting Twitter thread that we're going to dive into that detail who this guy's parents are and where all of this sort of emanated from. And let me pull this up. This came from Genco Stocks, at Genco Stocks. He posted this. He said, did that weird island over there ever get shut down or did it just move? He says, there's some really weird stuff going on with FTX. He says, hold on a minute. FTX was founded in 2019 and somehow it just exploded into the biggest name in crypto. How did that happen? Sponsored by the MLB, sponsored by basketball. Sam heavily lobbying members of Congress. His face was all over the place as the next Warren Buffett. And I know we started a crypto channel here and we, at some point, we sort of reversed, unwound some of that stuff because it was just too much. I was too busy to continue on with it. But really, this was kind of a shocking thing. This guy popped up all over the place and this mug was all over the internet. But the question from Genco is, how did he elevate to such a position so quickly? Let's look at his parents. His dad has written about and made a career off getting rid of the cash economy and helping the government find tax evasion. Weird that his son was the biggest name in crypto. Very curious. Some more here. You see photographs of Barbara Fried. You see some biographies here. We zoom in. It says, biography for Joseph Bankman. He's a leading scholar in the field of tax laws. Bankman is the author of 2 widely used casebooks on the subject. He is writing on tax policy, including the role of tax in the structure of Silicon Valley startups and how the government might control the use of tax shelters. He's testified in front of Congress and other legislative bodies on tax compliance and problems posed by the cash economy. That's dad. Mom works in distributive justice in the areas of tax policy, property theory, and political theory. And both of these people are professors at Stanford, professors of law at Stanford in California. So obviously a very smart family. I would imagine that that kid is probably freakishly smart as well, but very curious that they're all sort of in this interesting little cabal of nefarious activities. The CEO of FTX is the woman that we just saw previously. She is somebody who has high connections in various places. Interesting partnerships. You can see this individual, Jago Capital, said that the CEO of Goldman Sachs and David Solomon met with SBF FTX to help FTX get regulatory approval. All right, so Goldman Sachs here. Goldman Sachs, David Solomon, Goldman Sachs has met with Sam Bankman-Fried, a cryptocurrency exchange. Two major strands evolved out of their discussion. One where Goldman Sachs would help FTX get regulatory approval. Well, that's weird. Why would Goldman Sachs want to help basically a competitor get regulatory approval? And you see the pictures of people who are meeting to discuss these situations. Now, it turns out that after all of these people from Stanford and California were colluding and sort of propping this kid up, all the money was going in, and he turns out to be one of the largest donors to Democrats, second only to George Soros. Here's the list. SBF gave the second largest donation to Joe Biden's presidential campaign in 2020. Here you go. Here are the numbers. Top level mega donors in this cycle. Republicans had some big ones. They had Ken Griffin, Richard Uihlein. But Sam Bankman, he gave $37 million over to the Democrats. George Soros gave $128 million. Big, big numbers going to the Democrats. And where'd all that money come from? A lot of people have a lot of questions about that. 1 month after the war in Ukraine started, Zelensky partnered with FTX. We'll get to that story in a minute. And the entire saga about him being a poor little innocent individual, if you read the rest of that thread from @Genco Stocks, he's going to talk about some interesting symbology and the logos that they used and how those logos might match up with some other problematic things that the FBI has talked about historically. So check out that thread from @Genco Stocks on Twitter if you want to dive down a very fun rabbit hole, because boy, oh boy, there is some good stuff there. Now, we are going to go into a very useful Twitter thread from Balaji Srinivasin. He's going to explain to us exactly why this is so important. He's really demanding that we get to the bottom of all of this funding. And so we'll get there in one quick second. But first, my friends, if you're sick and tired of this crypto stuff, if you're like, man, this stuff is so confusing, you may not think it's a good asset. You might think about gold. If you have an IRA, a 401k, or a savings account, you know things are scary out there. You can lose your entire crypto stack overnight. The Biden administration, crypto hackers are all over the place. National debt's a disaster. Inflation is the highest we've seen since 1982. It's only a matter of time before the whole house of cards comes crashing down, just like what happened at FTX. If you've got retirement savings, your money could be at serious risk. Talk to my friends at Goldco to see how you can protect your retirement savings with gold and silver, not crypto, before it's too late. Go to robertlikesgold.com. They'll give you $10,000 or more in free silver when you sign up for a qualifying account. Check out robertlikesgold.com. Support our friends at Goldco. They are an A+ rated business with the Better Business Bureau, and we're grateful for your support of our sponsors. Okay, so now let's check in with Sam Bankman-Fried, because a lot of people are concerned about his donations. When SBF was asked about his contributions to Democrats, he got a little bit nervous. He's kind of squirmy in his chair, doesn't want to answer this question.
You think every money you spend in politics should be disclosed publicly? Are you comfortable with that?
I think that I think what I would say is, if there was a norm where every dollar that everyone donated in politics was to be disclosed publicly, I would have a lot of sympathy for that. I think I might support it. I haven't thought carefully about it enough to know. But
well, it sounds like what you're saying is Maybe there's some donations that you have made that you wouldn't make if you knew they were going to be immediately public?
So I think I don't generally think about it that way. I generally think of it as like these are the right the right contributions to make.
Shaking in his chair, probably Adderalled out or something more serious. Who knows? A lot of speculation about that's what that is, but other people say that that's just nervous because he realizes what's going on. He realizes he's being called out on all of these donations that are going to all sorts of Democrats, and he doesn't have the liquidity, he doesn't have the funds to support the balance that is due. And let me turn myself off. You can see him sort of shaking a little bit from this side view while he's talking about this.
I would have a lot of sympathy for that. I think I might support it. I haven't thought carefully about it enough to know. But
well, it sounds like what you're saying is maybe there's some donations that you have made that you wouldn't make if you knew they were going to be immediately public.
So I think I don't generally think about it that way. I generally think of it as like these are the right the right contributions to make.
They're the right contributions to make as long as nobody knows who is making them and exactly how much is being made and where they are going. The whole thing is just kind of a shocker. Now, the media, large part, has been sort of pushing this aside. The New York Times had a puff piece about this guy. They didn't mention, theft of billions of dollars. They didn't mention fraud or forgery or theft or money laundering. They didn't mention any of the Democratic connections there at the New York Times. There's really been big attempts to cover this whole thing up because they don't want to give the money back. And Balaji had an amazing thread on this. Once again, Balaji Srinivasin at Balaji S, an amazing follow. I've listened to basically every single interview he's ever given. He gave an 8-hour interview with Lex Friedman, if you want to listen to that podcast, but he's a brilliant dude. Highly credible. And I wouldn't even say highly partisan, right? He's somebody who is sort of crypto first rather than a political partisan person. Okay. Balaji says, the net result of FTX is that billions of dollars was stolen from crypto investors, everyday people, and given to Democrat-aligned politicians, nonprofits, and journalists to cover up their stink. This is why there may be no prosecution. Balaji says, why is SBF so protected? Why is everyone from the SEC to the New York Times, the Security Exchange Commission, to the New York Times running interference for this guy? He was basically Soros Jr., just with stolen customer money and evidently bought off the entire media, the nonprofit, political, and regulatory establishment. He links over to this article, which was archived. It says, the pandemic of SBF. The world of philanthropy and politics is fighting a 5-alarm fire right now. Billions of dollars that were theoretically going to flow to lobbying operations, super PACs, and scientists just went poof. Sam Bankman-Fried, his global crypto exchange, now declares bankruptcy. He was a little hyperbolic, but he said that he was going to spend $1 billion in 2024, which is basically the amount of money that entire campaigns spend. He was dispensing hundreds of millions of dollars a year on his philanthropic giving, who seemed to hire the entire industry of donor advisors. It's all gone up in flames. Jaw-dropping amount of money. He exploded from Democratic big money into the world of Democratic big money. He's the son of Stanford professors. His mother founded a hot donor network called Mind the Gap. His dad taught tax law. They hired aggressively for their influence. They got a place in the Bahamas. They shut down everything else. They wanted to focus on pandemic prevention. But everything came crashing down. It emerged that they had lent out half of its customer deposits. So it's like if you went to your bank to go withdraw $100, Sam, who runs the bank, says, sorry, I've already lent that out. $10 billion, all was extended out. Extinction event happens, everything comes crashing down. The conduct was very bad, but you can see exactly, sort of how bad this goes or where this goes. Balaji tells us more. He says, the author, the guy who just wrote that piece, is born a rich journo. So he knows the milieu of Bankman-Fried's. And the overall picture you get is of rats scurrying around now that the money has been cut off, very much not wanting any crypto investors like you and me to claw back those stolen funds. They say, let's be clear, the optics would look awful if SBF is giving away money to his whiz-kid political projects while millions of customers lose their deposits. All that money went over to the Democrats. The stage is set for an absolutely insane zero-sum match. On one side, 1 million crypto investors were robbed of $10 billion by SBF. $10 billion. 1 million people. Could you imagine being that guy? Sitting at home going, oh gosh. Or if he has to go walk down the street to pick up a gallon of milk. Gosh. On the other side, a network of dark money Democrats who will fight to keep as much of those stolen funds as possible. Do you think that $10 billion is just going to rematerialize and they're going to say, oh yeah, Sam gave us 100 million. Sam gave us 30 million. Here, we'll just give it back over to you. Of course not. So they're all going to go dark and they're all going to circle the wagons to protect him. Balaji says, the bankruptcy case may play out on social media. Crypto investors seeking to get back FTX funds may hire lawyers. People like this guy, Irving Picard, who clawed back 75 cents on the dollar for the Madoff victims. Who would they claw it back from, though, he asks. Where would they get this money from? Oh, yeah. They've got to go to the groups that SBF funded. All the politicians, all the non-political groups, all of the journos. That $10 billion is going to come out of their pockets. Two lawyers, Irving Picard, David Sheehan, they've recovered 75 cents on the dollar from the Bernie Madoff situation. But the fundamental question is from Balaji, when did SBF start stealing from customers and how much did he steal? This can only be accomplished through a forensic accounting. Now, the headlines that you're seeing posted all over the place is $37 million, okay? Because that's like what he reported on an FEC form. But that understates it. Balaji knows crypto inside and out. He lives it. He wrote a book called The Network State. The FTX Foundation alone was $190 million. $190 million from a foundation. Don't believe that $37 million. How much was stolen? The FTX contagion now appears to be spreading to some nonprofits, academics, institutes, think tanks, any people allied themselves with or received money from the FTX Foundation, which was funded by profits from Bankman's crypto exchange. The foundation claims, the one foundation, and this guy has a whole list of companies, 190 million bucks. Woo! That's some good money. It's unclear how much of that money came from the foundation's main giving vehicle, the Future Fund. They committed $160 million to nonprofits and researchers. Some of the money was redistributed to philanthropic causes. Now, Balaji says, all right, we need a list of all the donations he made, potentially with stolen money. Here's at least 4 of them. $69 million in political donations, mostly to Democrats, some to Republicans via his subordinate. And his subordinate did. I think there was about $29 million that his subordinate gave to Republicans. Okay, so like they're not stupid, right? You pay for everybody on both sides. If you really want to immunize yourself, you own everybody, right? Buy the Republican senators just like you buy the Democratic senators. Get them all in line. So he's got the Democrats, he's got the Republicans, $190 million to a foundation, $128 million to a PAC, and look, an undisclosed amount. No idea how much money went. Crypto billionaire Sam Bankman-Fried burst into the election cycle, giving the second largest donor to Democratic causes. $39.9 million, including $35 million to 3 different political action committees. Deputies at FTX gave nearly $29 million more. Woo! All of it stolen. They didn't earn that money. It's all customer money. $69 million spent by Bankman-Fried and his deputies in the midterms would have done little to plug his reported financial hole. Okay, so they didn't even have the money, but they were giving to Democrats like lunatics. And remember, that's like a Senate seat right there. 69 million bucks, that's a Senate seat. Mark Kelly, how much did he pay? 73 million in Arizona, and he got his seat. Blake Masters only got 9 million, right? He didn't get his seat. So you just do the math. That's a full Senate seat that they donated. Bankman told Forbes last month, in the end, I care about policy more than politics, he said. My giving has been bipartisan, and my goal is to help support great policymakers. Right. People who allow him to get away with continual theft. He supported Republicans through his $2 million contribution, they said in another post. FTX contagion here also appears to be spreading. The foundation, the FTX Foundation, $190 million. Again, don't know how much of that came from different entities because it's all now up in the air. But they had interest for philanthropic causes, artificial intelligence, space governance, biohazards, climate change, all under this fake banner of effective altruism. It's all for the good of the planet. It's all for the good of you. You'll be better if you just listen to me. All of these wacko saviors out there who think that they can save the planet. Now, here's another one. In general, Silicon Valley mega donors seem to be concerned with the cost effectiveness. The theory behind the PAC was a major player in 2020. Oh my gosh. The theory behind the FF PAC was that one of the most cost-effective interventions in campaigns was extremely late TV advertising. And the PAC was a major player in 2020. They spent $128 million on the presidential election. Woo! $128 million. That's a lot of money. And in this final post, this organization called GAP, Guarding Against Pandemics, another 501c3 where a bunch of money was funneled, $30 billion. Gabe spent hundreds of thousands of ads, hired both in-house and external lobbyists to try to convince Congress to apportion $30 billion for the anti-pandemic cause as part of Build Back Better. They wanted $30 billion to be appropriated to them from the government. Gap later started a PAC that raised another $85,000 from small donors who were capped. Gap, a dark money group, hasn't disclosed how much money it raised or how much money SBF donated, although it says it has multiple donors. So we have a limitless, an uncapped amount of money donated to political causes, grifted from FTX. Stolen, right? Not just a grift, a thievery. Balaji says all kinds of obfuscation games have been played here. Donations made with possibly stolen funds. Numbers that are publicly known may just be the tip of the iceberg. Where did the $10 billion go? How much of it was stolen and when was it stolen? He's got a $14 million mystery super PAC. A lot of problems. Now, the crypto clawback is where this becomes a bigger problem for them, because what happens if that $10 billion comes back? Anyone who has money that was taken, Balaji recommends learning the following terms: clawback, lookback, fraudulent conveyance, unjust enrichment, avoidable preference. He says, ask a lawyer. You may be able to recover your funds if SBF donated your money to one of these organizations. So if you got taken advantage of, you may contact a local lawyer and talk to them about your situation, and they may be able to do something for you. But this is why the establishment has been so muted. It's because 1 million crypto investors might claw back billions of dollars from the Democrats, from politicians, and from the media. And so they don't want you to get that money back because they want it for themselves and their Democratic colleagues, all of whom are now a lot richer at the expense of many, many innocent retail investors. Now, there was a story about how this money might have been being cleaned up by the Democrats. And CoinDesk is a very interesting crypto website, and they talked about the following some time ago. In March 2022, CoinDesk reported that FTX, which is now defunct and bankrupt, they were converting crypto contributions to Ukraine's war effort into fiat for deposit at the National Bank of Ukraine. Very interesting story. Back in March, the Ukrainian government launched a new crypto donations website on Monday, streamlining its multi-million-dollar effort to turn bitcoins into bullets, bandages, and other material. Very clever. Aid for Ukraine, which has the backing of crypto exchange FTX, a staking platform, will route donated crypto to the National Bank of Ukraine. Oh, very curious. Ukraine's crypto-savvy Ministry of Digital Transformation is also involved. The country's collective effort have already raised some $48 million in Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, according to the website. Other estimates Total amounts closer to 100 million. But totals vary with the market swings. The website deepens an unprecedented tie-up between public and private sector in crypto. FTX is converting donations into fiat at the National Bank of Ukraine. A press release described it as a first. Central bank is using donations to fund humanitarian aid programs, as well as the Ukraine armed forces, according to the website. The people will continue to fight for their freedom. Crypto assets proved extremely helpful in the facilitation of funding flows to Ukrainian citizens and soldiers, as well as raising awareness, right? Oh, he hinted at an upcoming NFT collection, also that's going to give a boost to the crypto fundraising effort. All there in Ukraine. Woo! All right, so that's just outstanding. So not only are they gobbling up your money, they're also apparently shipping it over to Ukraine. Now, we don't see much, we don't have many more details on this other than just speculation, but this is how some people are saying it could theoretically work, right? The U.S. government beats us all with a hammer and tells us we have to support Ukraine no matter what, for as long as it takes, and don't ask any questions about it. If you do, you're an insurrectionist of America because you love Putin. We've all heard that phrase many times. You've probably heard it 3 times today. And here, that sort of encourages us to say, sure, how much more money do you need? 40 billion? No problem. Another 40? No problem. What kind of weapons do you need? Ad nauseum. The U.S. government gives the money over to Ukraine. Ukraine then is converting that through FTX, whatever relationship they've got there. And then FTX is donating hundreds of millions of dollars over to the Democrats. It's sick, man. And it's our money, right? So you can see, nobody else knows where this guy got all of this money. Okay, where'd all this money come from? Where did it come from? He popped up out of nowhere. Probably from the U.S. taxpayer. Investors, we all know that, right? All of your private money was a part of that, but also maybe U.S. government money. Pretty shocking. Now, Sam, previously, Congress was all over this. Our very smart Congress people, they actually brought him in. They had questions for him, and apparently they couldn't figure much out. Here is SBF in front of Congress talking about how transparent he runs his business. And unfortunately, our very astute, very, very capable Congress people couldn't see quite through the facade.
Last thing that I'll say is if you look at what precipitated some of the 2008 financial crisis, you saw a number of bilateral, bespoke, non-reported transactions happening between financial counterparties, which then got repackaged and re-leveraged again and again and again, such that no one knew how much risk was in that system until it all fell apart. If you compare that to what happens on FTX or other major cryptocurrency venues today, there's complete transparency about the full open interest. There's complete transparency about the positions that are held. There's a robust, consistent risk framework applied, and we're excited to work with the CFTC on our U.S. licensed and regulated venue to bring a lot of this.
Glad we got all those regulations and licenses in place. Glad that our very smart, capable Congress people were sitting there asking him questions, and they did something about this before he took $10 billion away from many Americans. And I guess that's just our government at work. So pretty amazing. Now, the big question, of course, is will there be an investigation into any of this? Evidently, there is something that is bubbling up. We had this, did I link this up here? Yeah, we have some evidence that there is investigations taking place. This came from the Wall Street Journal. SEC DOJ investigating FTX, the crypto platform that is no longer. The SEC and the DOJ apparently have started an investigation. Somebody familiar with the matter said staff at the 2 law enforcement agencies were in close contact on Wednesday. Justice Department prosecutes criminal violations like fraud, while the SEC enforces civil investor protection laws. But a spokesman for the DOJ and the SEC declined to comment. Of course, FTX did not comment either. The SEC was investigating for months. They were focused on FTX.us, which lists dozens of crypto tokens. Officials believe some of the assets might constitute securities, and so they said, we're going to continue our job as a cop on the beat. SEC Chairman Gary Gensler said in an event, the runway is getting shorter and shorter for some of these intermediaries, he said. Other people are demanding that there are, prosecutions that start, but It's been pretty quiet. I haven't seen a real formal statement from the DOJ about what they're doing. It's all been mostly quiet. But a story popped up that was very fun. They're actually more interested, it seems like, in prosecuting one of their competitors. So this story was written by Colin Wilhelm, and he's asking questions about Binance, which is actually a competitor to FTX. This narrative you can see is bubbling up. The Block was reporting on this story, and it's reporting from Congress people. It says Binance's role. Okay, it's like a competitor. It's like literally a competing exchange. Binance's role in the collapse of FTX has sent reverberations around the crypto markets, and it's come under scrutiny, according to a senior House Republican. What? He says, this is serious. I think this is a major event, from Representative Patrick McHenry, Republican from North Carolina. He told The Block while acknowledging that Binance helped facilitate the meltdown. And of course, that is true, because Binance, in fact, did have some of the coin, and they started to sell their coin, which theoretically, instigated the liquidation, the mass withdrawal from FTX, which caused the collapse. But the point of me sharing this with you is that they're not even these Republicans, this North Carolina Republican, likely the next chairman of the House Financial Services, referred to a widely circulated meme on the internet saying that Binance CEO played a role in FTX's sharp decline. So why are they investigating a competitor rather than the actual entity itself? This first step is a bipartisan call for a hearing. We're going to prioritize this in the next Congress. Maxine Waters says it's a bipartisan call. We're going to work together. Does this add any urgency? She says, well, maybe. So, that's what our Congress people are doing in response. And they'll pass some additional legislation, and we will, of course, see where this goes. If any charges do come about, we will cover it. We've got a class action lawsuit that we're going to get to next, but wherever it is you're watching this, thank you for subscribing. Thank you for liking this video before you get out of here, and we look forward to seeing you on the next one. All right, my friends, we've got one final segment left before we wrap it up for the day, and we're talking about a class action, very, very similar to our last segment, but we've got an actual class action lawsuit to get to here against some pretty prominent people. A class action lawsuit filed against Tom Brady, Kevin O'Leary, most people in the NBA, it feels like, and a lot of others, pretty prestigious, pretty big names, celebrities who got caught up in the FTX fiasco. Before we get to the class action, which you can see here includes one of SBF's tweets right on the first page, let's check in with several of the people who are named in the class action lawsuit, starting with Tom Brady. He was involved in a commercial that supported FTX, and it looked like this.
So he's going to invest better, too.
FTX, that's the crypto app, right? Now it's for all kinds of investing. It's better. I like better.
Because the best are never done getting better.
Sure? Not a trade. I'm trading crypto. FTX is the safest and easiest way to buy and sell crypto. It's the best way to get in the game.
He's trading crypto.
Oh.
He's trading crypto, bro. Don't bother him. He's trading crypto. And he always likes to get better. That's Tom Brady. You got to appreciate, you get sponsors. You got to sell your sponsorships. And, RobertLikesGold.com, ForPatriots.com. Use promo code Robert. You see how it works. It's very important to, engage with your sponsors and so on. Here is Kevin O'Leary, who is saying, yeah, I actually worked pretty closely with FTX, and it's a pretty great company because Sam's parents are lawyers.
In managing the decisions on which projects to invest in, because I'm very fortunate, my deal flow is insane. I see everything. And I have to disclose, I'm a paid spokesperson to FTX and a shareholder there too.
Shareholder too.
Him, and big advocate for Sam because he has two parents that are compliance lawyers. If there's ever a place I could be that I'm not going to get in trouble, it's going to be at FTX. So
any place that you'll be safe, FTX, very easy. Don't even think twice about it. His parents are lawyers, and you can trust them. Now, a lot of other people had questions about this. The CEO of Coinbase is one of them. Brian Armstrong from Coinbase had a lot of suspicions about SBF and FTX. He was wondering, where'd they get all this money? How did he have all this liquidity to just dole out tens of billions of dollars to everybody, everywhere.
I had to scratch my head a bunch of times, and I was like, where is this guy getting all this liquidity? Because he was like buying 9% of Robinhood. He was putting like $1 billion into this. He was donating to all these politicians. And I was like, it did not make sense to me where he was getting all this cash. People just kept telling me, oh, his market maker Alameda is just printing cash. And I was like, okay, I guess, it seems like a conflict of interest to own an exchange and a market maker. That's why we haven't done it, but more power to him, I guess. And so I was surprised. I didn't speak up. I can't explain the psychology of it at this point, whether he's a pathological liar or if he's started off good and somehow under the pressure of this whole thing went bad. But the minute you can go watch the interviews,
or it was all by design.
He's lying to people about why he's bailing out Voyager and BlockFi and he knew at that time that most likely he knew at that time that they were not solvent. Alameda was not solvent, and so that's where he crossed a major line in my
major line, tens of billions of dollars gone. And a lot of people had questions about what happened. So we'll take a look at the class action lawsuit because there's some fun stuff in here. We can see it is 41 pages. And so we'll see what we get to here today. A class action lawsuit filed against Sam Bankman-Fried, jury demand included, 41-page document filed out of the Southern District of Florida in Miami. Starts as follows. It says, with a quote from Mark Cuban from November 12, 2022. Mark Cuban said, then there's things that have happened with Voyager and with FTX now that somebody's running a company that's just dumb as F greedy. So what does Sam Bankman do? He's just, give me more, give me more, give me more. So I'm going to borrow money, loan it to my affiliated company and hope and pretend to myself that my tokens that are in there on my balance sheet are going to sustain their value. The next quote introduced in this class action is from SBF himself. Defendant Sam Bankman-Fried, former CEO of FTX. Lawyers write a tweet from SBF where he says, 1, I'm sorry. That's the biggest thing. I effed up and should have done better. The lawyers write that the plaintiff, Edwin, files this class action on behalf of him and millions of other investors against all of these people. And look at these names, my friends. Woo! Woo! We have Sam Bankman-Fried, Tom Brady, Gisele Bündchen, Stephen Curry, Golden State Warriors, Shaquille O'Neal, Udonis Halim, David Ortiz, William Trevor Lawrence, Shohei Ohtani, Naomi Osaka, Lawrence Jean David, Larry David. Pretty good. And Kevin O'Leary, collectively named the defendants. All parties who either controlled, promoted, or assisted in, actively participated in FTX offer and sale of unregistered assets are all listed in there. Now, the introduction says, the deceptive and failed FTX platform was based on false representations and deceptive conduct. Although many incriminating FTX emails and texts have already been destroyed, we located them, and they evidence how FTX fraudulent scheme was designed to take advantage of unsophisticated investors from across this country who use mobile apps to make their investments. As a result, American consumers collectively sustained over $11 billion in damages. FTX organized and emanated its fraudulent plan from its worldwide headquarters located here in Miami. Miami became the hotspot for crypto companies, hosting the most investments in crypto startups, as well as the annual Bitcoin Miami 2022 Global Forum. Several crypto companies, including Blockchain, Ripple, and FTX US, moved their headquarters to Miami. Others, including eToro, expanded their U.S. presence in Miami as well. FTX, already familiar, they signed a deal worth $135 million for the naming rights where the Miami Heat play the stadium. In the background section, they tell us that on December 24, 2021, lawyers for Edwin bought and brought the only putative class action lawsuit against Voyager. Voyager Digital was unregulated and fraud. They also alleged that other people like Cuban and Dallas Mavericks were involved and they sustained losses. There were allegations in that complaint, and they're telling us about that complaint. Let's fast forward a little bit. Everyone involved in those other cases thought that FTX and their entities were the deus ex machina. They were going to come to save the day, right? So they give us some background on a prior crypto company that was in bankruptcy, and FTX came in. They've got all this liquidity. They say, oh, we'll come and we'll give you this money. They were going to give them $111 million, $1.13 billion, and save them. Instead, as explained below, the FTX entities imploded. Over $30 billion in value evaporated overnight. Okay, like that. 30 billion. That's like a tech company. That's like Lyft just going away. Maybe it's not. Maybe I don't even know how big they are. Pick a big $30 million market cap company. It's huge. An FTX entity, they found themselves filing their own emergency bankruptcy in Delaware. The deceptive platform FTX maintained by the FTX entities, they say, was truly a house of cards. It was a Ponzi scheme where FTX entities shuffled customer funds around between opaque entities. They used new investor funds obtained through investments and loans to pay the interest on the old ones, and they maintained the appearance of liquidity. Part of the scheme involved utilizing some of the biggest names in entertainment, like everybody named here, to raise funds and drive consumers to invest. And it worked. Billions of dollars were poured in. The defendants disclosed their partnerships with the entities, but they never disclosed the amount of compensation they received. So in other words, they're saying that these individuals should have disclosed how much money they made from the FTX relationship. Moreover, they say none of these defendants performed any due diligence prior to marketing their products. So they're saying, Tom Brady, he didn't look into it at all. He just said, yeah, it's great. The SEC previously have gone after other people, Floyd Mayweather, DJ Khaled. They got in big trouble for ICOs, for doing this type of stuff. They had to pay back a ton of money, $776,000. Other celebrities similarly situated, Kim Kardashian and Paul Pierce, they had to send in a bunch of money back for losing more than $80 million, in large part due to big crypto scams. But these misrepresentations continue, and now this action, this class action, seeks to hold them all responsible for billions of dollars. So let's take a look at the people who are listed as defendants. First, we have the person who's filing this lawsuit. His name is Edwin Garrison. He's a citizen. He lives in Oklahoma. Shout out to our Oklahomans. He is a natural person over age 21. He purchased an unregistered security from FTX. He got YBA and funded the account with interest in his holdings. Garrison did so after being exposed to some or all of the advertisements that we saw from Brady and others. As a result, Garrison has sustained damages. Now, the defendant, Tom Brady, is an NFL quarterback currently playing for the Buccaneers. He's a brand ambassador for FTX, and he lives in Miami-Dade County. Gisele Bündchen, one of the highest paid models across the world, she's also an ambassador for FTX. Kevin O'Leary is Mr. Wonderful, a businessman, television personality on Shark Tank, also a brand ambassador, lives in Miami as well. Defendant Udonis Haslam, a professional basketball player for Miami Heat. Ortiz is a designated hitter, first baseman for MLB. Sam, of course, was the CEO of FTX. Stephen Curry plays for the Golden State Warriors, Another defendant is the Golden State Warriors in general, the entire basketball team, because they unveiled the FTX logo on the court at their arena. Shaquille O'Neal, oh, come on, man. They're going after Shaq, former professional NBL basketball player star, sports analyst, entrepreneur, and FTX brand ambassador. Quarterback for the Jacksonville Jaguars, William Trevor Lawrence, professional baseball pitcher, Shohei Ohtani, Naomi Osaka, tennis player, and Larry David, American comedian, writer, and activist who lives in Los Angeles, California, is an FTX brand ambassador. So a lot of people here listed. Now, they say that the court has jurisdiction because a lot of this stuff happened in Florida, and they give us some background. They say, all right, until seeking the protection of the bankruptcy court, FTX operated a multi-billion-dollar crypto platform. There was a bunch of people who created a number of different exchanges. This guy is MIT-educated Sam Bankman-Fried. It was extremely successful. They were responsible for $15 billion in assets, 10% of global volume in crypto. 300 people on the FTX team, quickly became one of the most utilized avenues for nation investors. But by the time they filed for bankruptcy protection, customers had entrusted billions of dollars to them, estimates ranging from 10 to 50 billion. Whew! Bankman got rich, with the two companies netting $350 million and $1 billion in profit alone. He was worth, at his peak, $26 billion. At 30, he became a major political donor. He got celebrities like the co-defendants to promote his company. CoinDesk placed a bombshell report questioning how big his empire really was in November 2022. It was officially broken into two parts. He had two entities, FTX, his exchange, Alameda Research, which was his trading firm. He got information from Binance that they had about half a billion in their token, and that they decided to liquidate it. Okay, so there was another exchange that said, we're about, you know what you think is valuable? We have $500 million of that thing you think is valuable. We don't think it's valuable, so we're going to sell all of it. When we sell all of it, it's going to notify everybody else that it's not valuable, and they're all going to sell it so that they get whatever remaining value is out of the token before it crashes into oblivion. Customers raced to pull out. FTX saw an estimated $6 billion in withdrawals over 72 hours, most of which it struggled to fulfill. People couldn't get their money out. The value of the FTT token plunged 32%, rallied again with the surprise announcement that FTX would be bought out, but it wasn't done. The deal never went through, and it all came crashing down. On November 11th, unable to obtain a bailout, FTX filed for bankruptcy and Bankman resigned. Following his resignation, Bankman-Fried issued a 22-tweet-long explanation of where he believed he went wrong. He said the following on Twitter: "I'm sorry. That's the biggest thing. Oh, that's nice. I effed up and I should have done better. I also should have been communicating more very recently." Yeah, probably a good call. He says, transparently, "My hands were tied during the duration of the possible Binance deal. I wasn't particularly allowed to say much publicly, but of course, it's on me that we ended up here in the first place." So here's an update on where things are. He says, "This is all about FTX International, the non-US exchange. FTX US users are fine. We'll see. Treat all of these numbers as rough. These are approximations." Okay, this was on November 10th. He says FTX International currently has a total market value higher than clients' deposits, but that is different from liquidity. The full story here is I'm fleshing out every detail, but long story short, I effed up. The first time, a poor internal labeling of bank-related accounts meant that we were substantially off on users' margin. I thought it was way lower. So his spreadsheets were off. Numbers are hard. He says, "My sense before that our leverage was 0x, US liquidity was 24x average daily withdrawals, but in actuality, he was off by a factor of 24. Leverage was 1.7 and liquidity was 0.08x. Because of this, when it rains, it pours. We saw 5 billion of withdrawals on Sunday, the largest margin ever." And so he says, "I was off twice. Tells me a lot of things that I was terrible at. And a third time, I'm not communicating enough. And so I'm sorry. Here we are. It sucks. And that's on me. I'm sorry." Yeah, okay. Anyway, right now, my number one priority by far is doing right by users. Well, do you have a $10 billion lying around? No, you don't. And I'm going to be doing everything I can to do that, to take responsibility. And so right now, we're spending the week doing everything we can to raise liquidity. I can't make any promises on that, but I'm going to try and give anything I have to if that will make it work. Okay. There are a number of players who we're in talks with, letters of intent, term sheets, and so on. We'll see how that goes. And every penny of that and all of the existing collateral will go straight to users. After that, investors old and new. Because at the end of the day, he says, I was CEO, which means that I was responsible for making sure that things went well. I ultimately should have been on top of everything, and I clearly failed in that. I'm sorry. And I'm not sure what this means going forward. That depends on what happens next week, but here are some things I know. One way or another, Alameda is winding down trading. They aren't doing any of the weird things that I see on Twitter, and nothing large at all. And one way or another, they're not going to be trading on FTX either. Second, in any scenario in which FTX continues operating, we're going to be focused on radical transparency. You're going to tell us who you donated all that money to? Where all of it went? Who's responsible? Who has all of that money? We can start there. He says transparently probably should have always been in giving. Giving as close to on-chain transparency as it can be is exactly what should be happening. Now, he says all of the stakeholders would have a hard look at our governance. But the only thing I'm trying to do right now is to do right by the users. At some point, I'll tell you more. But for all I can say now, at some point, I'll have to talk about a sparring partner, so to speak. But you know, glass houses. So for now, all I'll say is well played, you won. What? What do you mean you won? You stole 10 billion bucks, brother. He says, not advice in any way. I was not very careful with my words here and do not mean them in a technical or legal sense. That's not going to hold up in court. I may well have not described things right, although I'm trying to be transparent. I'm not a good dev and probably misdescribed something. Oh, gosh. Somebody take his phone away. And finally, I sincerely apologize. We'll keep sharing updates as we have them. All right. That's his explanation. Now, the lawsuit says, well, according to a recent Reuters report, another explanation is contributing to the house of cards. Bankman secretly transferred at least $4 billion in customer funds to Alameda without telling anyone to cover their losses. And FTX lent out more than half of its $16 billion in customer funds, with more than $10 billion in loans outstanding. So, okay, you can just see if that matches up with Sam's explanation. But the rest of this, my friends, is, you know, a lot of sort of legalese detailing the facts about what happened. Let's fast forward and see some of the defendants in here and see what some of the allegations are. They are going after the defendants. They're saying, in addition to Sam and all of his problems, they gave a bunch of money to a bunch of influencers. They said that they use stars like Brady, Boonchen, and other defendants. They said, we're newcomers to the scene, and the company needs to familiarize consumers and beat other companies like Coinbase. In other words, FTX needed celebrities like the defendants. People like Tom and Giselle Boonchen, seen here. They were a couple. They became ambassadors. They joined the company's $20 million ad campaign. They filmed a commercial. FTX, you in? Kevin O'Leary, seen sitting here with Sam Bankman-Fried. Mr. Wonderful was a brand ambassador as well. He said on a Twitter account post, he said, to find crypto investment opportunities that met my own rigorous standards of compliance, I entered a relationship with FTX. Posted that, but then he deleted the tweet. Ugh. He also served as a judge for an FTX charity. And very recently, O'Leary stated confidently that FTX was totally compliant. He said, I have to disclose I'm a paid spokesman to FTX. And if there's ever a place I'm going to get in trouble, it's going to be, I'm not going to get in trouble. It's going to be FTX. We heard that quote. He also evidently posted this on some platform. Oh, it's YouTube. He said he posted this on October 12th. There are a lot of signs right now that point to things looking bad. Crypto has taken a big hit. Investors are wondering if things will turn around. If you follow history and the patterns of things, you know this is the right track. There is going to be a resurgence in crypto. He posted that on his YouTube channel. Other people like this guy, Udonis, works for the Miami Heat, plays for the Miami Heat. David Ortiz also starred in one of those commercials. We have Larry David, I guess, was in one of those commercials. Steph Curry joined on the FTX advertisement campaigns. He said, I'm not an expert and I don't need to be, right? Deferring responsibility a little bit. With FTX, I have everything I need to buy and sell safely. That was the whole selling part. They had a whole campaign called #NotAnExpert. So they reached out to everybody. FTX was the official crypto platform of the Golden State Warriors. Nobody vetted them. Shaquille O'Neal says, we couldn't keep it a secret any longer. We're partnering with the one and only Shaq Toshi, who is, that's sort of a name that they're playing off of Satoshi Nakamoto, who is evidently the pseudo-anonymous founder of Bitcoin. Shaquille O'Neal said, I'm all in. Are you? Trevor Lawrence, World of Sports will never be the same. Signed up with Blockfolio. Shohei Ohtani, welcome to the team with FTX. He's an MLB superstar. He got unspecified payments to increase awareness about FTX. Now, you know, to be honest, like, you know, these people these are just This is like standard stuff for these people, you know? I don't know who's responsible for vetting all of this stuff, but I guess once they got started, you know, once they got like Shaq, for example, they go over to Naomi and they're like, hey, Naomi, you want to sponsor FTX? She's like, what's FTX? She's like, it doesn't matter. Shaq's sponsoring us. I'm like, oh, well, if Shaq's doing it, I guess I'll do it. You know, and this is how it goes. She's a 24-year-old professional tennis player. I assume that most of these people don't know much about crypto, and they're just, you know, getting paid to sponsor something. She confirmed her involvement by tweeting a new FTX ad to 1.1 million followers. They thought that they made the rules for us, that they could control us, and they were wrong. Here's Larry David. Larry David apparently was actually correct on this. He said, I don't trust any of this crap. For his part, the legendary comedian and creator of Seinfeld and Curb Your Enthusiasm created an ad for FTX called Don't Miss Out on Crypto. It aired during the Super Bowl in 2022, making FTX one of the most retweeted brands during the Super Bowl. The ad, the only Super Bowl commercial that David ever appeared in, featured David being a skeptic on a historically important invention as the wheel, the fork, the toilet, democracy, the light bulb, the dishwasher, the Sony Walkman, and of course, FTX. He cautioned viewers, don't be like Larry because he's a big skeptic. I never trust that. I never trust that. So they're alleging that these plaintiffs were obviously taken advantage of. These are the different, we don't talk a lot about class actions on this channel, but in order to be certified as a class, you've got to meet a class definition. They're telling us what that is here. Nationwide class, Florida subclass. We've got enough people in this class, right? Like you can't have a class if it's like you and your brother, like file a class action. It's like 3 of us. No, maybe not. This is a big class. Millions of consumers who use this. Do they have a common claim? Are they 2 separate claims? No, they're pretty much the same. They got ripped off and they're entitled to the same type of reliefs. The types of claims, the types of remedies are all typical. They would all be adequately represented. One of the things the court has to do is certify it as a class action before it can proceed. And so they're telling the court, yep, all the requirements have been met under the rules. Got that one, got that one. Nature of the notice. We're going to notify everybody. Here's how we're going to do it. We're going to do it by email, mail, and a published notice. And these are the counts. They violated the Florida statutes, fair and deceptive, unfair trade practices, civil conspiracy. They made numerous misrepresentations to everybody. I don't even need to be an expert. Saying that all the defendants, had knowledge of some of the problems of this, or it encouraged the wrongdoing. They want declaratory judgment. And finally, here is the prayer for relief. In the class action, they say, they want damages, but we don't see an amount. We actually don't see any numbers here. So attorney's fees, injunctions, damages, all of this stuff. We'll see where this goes. But filed by Adam Moskowitz, Florida Bar, the Moskowitz Law Firm, and David Bowie, who I think we've talked about here on this channel before. I think related to maybe the GM case. So all of this submitted now, a pretty massive class action lawsuit, listing a bunch of different defendants. I think the big defendant that everybody really wants is this guy right here. Shaq, okay. Yeah, but Sam is really the big problem, I think. So pretty interesting class action. And of course, we'll see where this goes. It's going to be the first of a long list of lawsuits and filings that go after FTX and SBF, as there should be many of them. Of course, we will continue to cover this stuff and more. Thank you for subscribing, following, wherever it is you're watching this. Thank you for liking this video. We'll see you on the next one. All right, my friends. That is it for us on the segments on the program today. We got the FTX class action lawsuit, the slush fund for the Democrats that has been slowly revealed to us. And of course, we talked about the Trump tax fight in the Supreme Court. But now it is time to hear from you and to see what you have to say about all of this and more. I saw a couple super chats come in, and so let's do a refresh on the screen and make sure we say thank you to those of you who sent those in so that we can read those and get those answered before we jump into our locals after party, which is where we will address the locals comments. But I am having to log in again because that's something that always happens when I'm live and stream. It always logs me out. It's, no, you don't. We're going to make this more difficult for you while you're in the middle of a stream. And I say, oh, great. That's perfect. Thanks. And so that's what we're going through right now. While I'm talking, I'm logging in, pulling up the different screens because they just try to make it painful for me. All right, so I saw a couple of these come in today. Let's see. The first one is from Chris Wolney. He says, if high-profile people like Trump aren't safe from DORFA jobs, neither are nobodies like us. Yeah, the DORFA jobs are what's the definition? It's the government jobs where you don't have, I can't remember it right now, but it's outstanding. Chris Wolney. It's something about other people's wasting time, wasting effort. It's a bureaucratic phrase, but I can't remember it right now, but I love it. DORFA jobs. I'll remember it again. We have random person says off subject, but Brooks got max on all counts. Not a surprise there. I think that was going to be pretty obvious. But I know that one is basically done now, finally. I mean, gosh, what a saga that was. And hopefully, the families can get some stinking rest at this point because that was a lot. But my friends, I think that is it for us today. And so we're going to wrap it up right there. We had a super chat, or we had a tip that came in from Patricia on Locals. She said, if they get, where did that go? It literally just disappeared as I was reading it. Unbelievable. Okay, so Patricia, I'll have to find that one. I don't know where it went, but said something about Trump. I literally don't know where it went, so I apologize for that. We'll read that over on the Locals chat. But otherwise, my friend, I want to say thanks to everybody who was on our Rumble chat. I've got Little Galaxy 56 over there. Bellow, Hollow, Dog Digger, Vientikis is over there, along with Hiker 7. We have Knights Templar in the house, and others chatting away on the Rumble community. Shout out to our Rumble friends. And I think that's it, everybody. So we will leave it right there. I want to thank everybody who was a part of the show. We're going over, by the way, to watchingthewatchers.locals.com. We'll spend another little bit going through some questions and some comments over there for our after party. So come and join us at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. Before we wrap it up, I want to thank the sponsors of the show. Of course, check out Goldco. Go to robertlikesgold.com. Protect your savings. Don't invest in FTX. This is not financial advice. But also check out forpatriots.com. Don't want to starve to death out there. No, sir. So use promo code Robert, get some good food. And check out our law firm, by the way. I know many of you are not located in Arizona, but if you happen to hear of somebody who's visiting Arizona or needs some help in our state, please send them over to our law firm. We have a mission to help good people charged with criminal charges find safety, clarity, and hope in their lives and, of course, in their cases. 480-787-0394, online at rrlawaz.com. Thank you for keeping your ears peeled for us because your referrals really do keep us busy. And I'm very appreciative for them. Also, want to thank the mods who mod down the fort for us. Shout outs to Vientikis, Prime, K-Bean, Just Cause, Lean in the House, Playin' Hooky 1, along with Ronnie Cole, Zulu, Geomancy swung by. He's on YouTube, of course, as well as Henry, who swings by from time to time. But otherwise, my friends, we are done for the day. We are going to be back here tomorrow to do it all again. And I hope to see you right here so that together with your help, we can shine that big, beautiful spotlight of accountability and transparency down upon our system with the hope of finding justice. Have a tremendous evening, my friends. I'll see you right back here tomorrow. Bye-bye.